Times of change can be incredibly hard to navigate as a fan base. There'll be loads of people trying to put forward arguments as to going one route or the other. And the Mo Salah situation is one which kind of typifies everything about where Liverpool are at, where Liverpool have been, and where Liverpool are going right now. Let's break some of those things down on the Laurence McKenna on LFC channel. If you haven't already hit the Patreon, it's up there. If you haven't already subscribed, it's down there. And of course, there's a Discord that if you want to get into and chat down there, you're more than welcome to. It's been a weird couple of weeks for Liverpool. When I say couple, I mean like month and a half at this point. There have been a lot of weird results in that time, times where you think Liverpool could and should have performed better, times where you can completely justify and understand why these things are happening. But of course, it doesn't make it any easier that Liverpool felt on the cusp of doing something special and then didn't do that. Ended an era which feels so defining for the club in such a lackluster way. And of course, there will always be frustration around that. And with frustration comes a lack of being sure, with the unsure nature of everything that's going on in the future anyway, with the way that we're going to change our... You know what's weird about it is, we are going to change away from what Klopp was doing in the last couple of seasons, but essentially we're going back towards a lot of what made Liverpool successful previously, from Edwards, the idea of the recruitment of players, the idea of where the club is actually going, those kind of things. And I guess what we're not sure about is how it all sticks together without Jurgen. That, of course, Jurgen is like a massive factor within that. But I think what we've seen in the last few days is that also if we'd have moved forward with Jurgen, some of those factors may not have remained the same either. And the Salah outburst or the Salah anger or whatever you want to call it shows that. And of course, people are reacting now to Salah staying, or at least staying, we'll talk about that in a second, immediately after this kind of blowout or disagreement, whatever you want to call it, on the sidelines with Klopp. And then the immediate comments afterwards, which were not really comments, but were whatever, right? Whether you interpret those as him venting, him saying, hey, there's way more to this, you guys don't even know, or whether it's just him joking around, they show that there was a lack of maybe respect for gravity for the situation for Liverpool fans and how we're feeling about this. I think at this point, it kind of shows how separate some of the players and some of the goings on day to day at the club feel to the actual fan base, be those online or the people in the stadium, and how actually our own fan base, any fan base that's subject to change online, can rip itself apart because people all have their opinions as to where we need to go. So with that, let's break down Salah. Salah has been an incredible player for this club. He has been era-defining under Jurgen Klopp. A huge amount of that is down to the individual talent that he showed. And of course, also the fact that no one expected this when he first signed for the club. A lot of people thought this would possibly be someone who would go on to back up whichever winger it was that we did sign, who would go on to be a player at the club that, hey, he'll be there for a couple of seasons, but, you know, we'll have someone else come in. And ultimately, he became one of Liverpool's greatest ever, at least Premier League era players. It's hard to see where he sits in the overall pantheon of great players because, believe me, there are a lot of great attacking players, but definitely Premier League-wise, Salah feels era-defining, right? Now, to add to that, obviously he holds a lot of records for the club. He's an incredible leader in the locker room, or has been over the last few seasons. But as we've seen some of those previous leaders leave, we've also seen different roles change. Now, what I mean by that is Salah has always been one of those silent leaders. Salah has always been one of those guys who led by example or tried to lead by example, typified the intensity and enactment of what Klopp wanted out on the field. But on top of that, he was also quite quiet for a lot of that. But you could see there was like a bubbling under personalities. As far as I've been told, he's one of the smartest players that a lot of people have interacted with. His agent, clearly also a smart guy, but someone who acts on his behalf, someone who he can use or speak through, right? And I guess the frustration comes as a player when you know that you've got a decision to make yourself, and so do the club. Ronaldo went through it. Messi, of course, went through it in his own career. Every big player comes to a crossroads. Is it about winning? Is it about legacy? Can it be about both of those things? Or is it about making money towards the end of your career and securing generational wealth, or at least wealth which will take your family and make them very comfortable for a very long time, if you don't already have that? On top of that, how do you feel that you know that maybe your days at the club are numbered, or maybe the end of an era is coming and you're not quite sure what's going to happen next, and so you're angry about that, you're frustrated. You're frustrated with the person who you have relied on for such a long time, and suddenly you actually don't need to rely on them anymore. Maybe for the next 5 games you do, but you don't need to rely on them for a title. That feels like it's already slipped away. You don't need to rely on them for a European Cup. That's already slipped away. You don't need to rely on them for another cup. That's already gone. You've got one trophy with them, but that's not really worth a parade at this point, though I would love an end of Jurgen Klopp parade, but you're then put in a position where it's like, what is it next? Like, am I as valuable to the club now as I was even 12 months ago, or 18 months ago, or 2 years ago? Would I actually be better on the chopping block or on the transfer block, right? And would Liverpool actually move on pretty quickly? Because in the modern era, managers can change out a lot of these positions very quickly. Slot is clearly one of those managers who's going to come in and try and upgrade a lot of the young players, try and change the way that we play, at least in terms of application, at least in terms of... He's not going to be exactly the same as Klopp. There are going to be principles that are the same, but his movement won't be the same. His holding of the ball, he won't be that same counter-attacking manager that Jurgen Klopp was, which relied so much on the likes of Salah, Mane, Firmino, to be incredibly good in instinctive moments. Of course, players always rely on instinct, but you get what I'm saying here. Like, Slot is going to change the emphasis in the team, and therefore, will he change where the emphasis away from someone like Salah's position goes? And therefore, do we bank on someone like Salah and go, hey, we're going to sell you because actually we can get another player in this position for a fifth of the price and change our output to a different degree because the emphasis will go somewhere else on the field? We've always emphasized Mo Salah. We've always loved him for the fact that we put so much pressure on him. But at the same time, that pressure and that emphasis will sometimes change. We've never tried really someone else in that position. And in fact, when Salah was out more recently, or at least away, we saw that, hey, Liverpool's front line actually did pretty decently in that time. Guess what? Because the dynamic was different. Our emphasis in that time was different. The assumption can always be that because you've got your strongest starting 11 in your head, therefore that player will always be there. That player should always be there. And that player would always be there because, well, you think they're the best. And in your mind, you perceive them as the best. But the same goes for the emphasis on what Klopp is doing right now. We're about to find out. I'm not saying that Klopp isn't important. I'm not saying that Salah hasn't been brilliant. Those are not the things I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're about to see whether we can shift away from those dominant factors and still thrive, still move forward, whether change will diminish them as inputs, or actually whether our output will increase because a change in culture, a change in approach, a change in some of the approaches that we've had to some of our play might actually be healthy. A rest is as good as a change. A change is as good as a rest. That works both ways in my current analogy, but you get my point. Like, Klopp has taken this team so far. He's lifted them to new levels, but they're also only so long that you can keep players up at those heights and before they have to move on physically, mentally, even just age-wise, right? And if you're going to bring Edwards back in, it clearly feels like it's going to be a move away from what Jurgen wanted. He wanted more control over the transfers at the club. And arguably, some of those transfers have come good because of his own system. But also, arguably, moving away from that system, I don't think that's such a bad thing. You know, some people are critical of Nunez. Some people are critical of the way that we've lined up against some other teams. Substitutes, rotation, injuries in that time because of the intensity of our play. No one is saying that Klopp's legacy is marred because of any of this. What we're saying is that in change, you begin to appreciate some of what Klopp has actually appreciated and achieved. Let's say, like, that Salah outburst, whatever you want to call it, the Salah moment, shows there is a competitor in there, someone who wants to achieve, someone who has frustrations. And how often is it that we've actually seen that happen for Mo Salah, at least publicly? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, how often is it that we get that glimpse into what Klopp has managed to maneuver and change over the last few years to get the best out of these players relatively consistently? Because even if we drop to 8th or whatever it is, or whatever time under Klopp, that's still a very high level of performance. And I know it doesn't justify expenditure, or, you know, there are loads of people like, well, you think you've got the best team in the world, you've got best goalkeeper, best central defender, best right back, best this, best that. Shouldn't you be always winning the Premier League? Well, couldn't you say the same for a lot of other top sides? I shouldn't be responding to, like, City neeks in this video, but that's not my point. The point is, right, look at Salah now. Yes, we can see that there is an output there. There is an incredible player there, right? But I think we know that if we were to go to the market with whatever money will come back from Salah, I'm not advocating that he leaves, though I am relatively exploring that idea. We know that a new manager might be able to put emphasis on another part of the team. Say there's a goal-scoring striker that comes in. Say we change the way that we build up. It becomes more about that double pivot in the middle or the 10 there. Does Salah Does Salah fit that? Or could we bring in another winger who may have a different output, a different set of skills, a different emphasis, considering that season on season after the last three seasons, Salah's dribbles and the way that we thought of him as playing in the previous iteration of Klopp has changed? Maybe now we need another player with a different level of emphasis and a different kind of build-up play. It's not saying we don't still want him. It's not saying I wouldn't love to finish his career at Liverpool. It's saying you might want to be somewhere else. And we might need a different input into this side. Plug something else in there and see what happens. It sounds almost dangerous or stupid to say because Salah's output feels like a cheat code. Because in a lot of Klopp systems, guess what? Klopp values a lot of what Salah does. We don't know what Slot's going to do. And we don't, there was another conversation I was having earlier today about the emphasis of where Slot would want his team to play. And if he had to move away from Salah, if he was given the decision to have him in the team or not, which I don't think he will be given that decision. I think if he does sign a new contract, great. We know, therefore, that Slot and Edwards and Hughes want to see Salah stay. Not only as a marketing piece, but also as a footballing piece. Maybe he'll play less minutes, though that would be insane to let him sign another big contract and then play less minutes. But there we go. Or is the news that leaked today actually about Liverpool saying, hey, yeah, he wants to stay. Yeah, we want to keep him. But let's get some market value here. Because an outburst showing that you don't want to be at a club can diminish that value, right? And that, I think, is also a valid angle to explore. That Liverpool and Edwards are still trying to get the most value out of this Salah transfer to try and get more value later in the summer, to try and get more value from the other transfers. Because if people think, hey, Salah's going to leave and clearly he's going to go, which a lot of people clearly still think, loads of people, ITKs on Twitter, ITKs that I've spoken to, club level related people, seem to think, they don't know whether Salah's going to stay or go. Maybe you want to get that value, and maybe therefore you want people to think, hey, Salah does want to stay, so the club can then say, hey, look, he wants to stay, give us our value. Those things are important. It's not just about saying Salah's going to be good for you, give us the money. It's about saying Salah wants to stay, you got to tempt him away. We want Salah to stay, you got to pay us in order for him to leave. These are big factors which play a big part. And the Klopp goodbye tour, or whatever you want to call it, is distracting from that on a narrative level. But actually, I think behind the scenes, relatively, things aren't going to change all that much. People already know whether they want to stay or leave Liverpool. Liverpool already know whether they want players to stay or leave. A change of heart isn't going to change what Edwards and Hughes think. A change of heart on emotional levels isn't going to change statistical output or what Slot thinks can fit into his team. So what I'm saying is, in this unsure time, it's silly to go throwing people under the bus, because I think the transfer smoke and mirrors of everything that's going on doesn't always reflect what the actual future of the club is, but it makes for great headlines for TalkSport, makes for great headlines for everyone else. And boy, is it smart for us to explore it as a fan base. How do you feel about Salah? How do I feel about Salah? I personally could take or leave at the moment. It's nothing to do with that outburst on the weekend, but I think players move on, and you die a superhero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. The villain in this case could just be a natural demise of a player or a natural tail off. But those things, they change how people try to portray you in the public and in the media and those things. And those things, I want to protect a legacy here is what I'm saying. Now, I'm interested to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. That was a mixture of Salah and Klopp. I'm going to speak about Klopp later in the week. Probably tomorrow. But the Salah thing feels weird right now. Would you take or leave him? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll chat to you again on the next video. Much love. Bye.